Well, good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be here for PrimeTime. I sincerely say that. I teach regularly over at Mustard Seeds. A lady told me this morning that this is just a different special needs class.
That's right.
So I had to add that. But you can feel free as I teach over there. I'm used to have food thrown at me. I'm used to being yelled at. I'm used to being told to get off the stage. They do everything you can imagine. They feed me over there. They throw up on me over there. They kick me. They stomp me. But what they do most of all that keeps me going back is they love me. And you won't be loved more than by a person with special needs. And that's what gets me, keeps me going over there. They pray for me. They hold me up when I might be down. They're always happy. You can always get the same response from them. And it's an amazing ministry for me to be over there. I will never leave it. So as much as I say that, the Lord could take me in a lot of different places, but I'm so thankful that He's opened that door for me to be over there. And we're doing well. We've just reopened not too many weeks ago, and we're up to about, I think we're getting 10 right now over there. The care homes are keeping most of them at bay until we get a little bit more apt to go out and do things. But it's growing. The leadership's glad to be back, and it's awesome. So when I had these rare opportunities, I had told Gordon a few weeks ago, I says, me not being able to teach or talk or spread a message, it's really hurting my inner ministry. I need to do this. And then all of a sudden he sends out his schedule and I'm on it. I'm like, what? So careful of what you ask for, because you're going to be doing things the Lord will open up for you. But it's been, and the good thing about Gordon is there's no curriculum. He trusts the Lord, that the Lord's going to put on your heart to teach what's on your heart. And so there's no restrictions, so you're really in for it today. But this is really fun. It's really cool. I'm so honored to be able to talk today. And we're going to really step into a lot of statistics today. And I think I'm going to bring up some stuff that maybe you haven't seen before or aren't familiar with. I'm going to introduce my grandson's fishing pole, because this is going to be my pointer if I need it. So see the little hook on the end, but this is what he uses. So I told my wife I need something to point, and she says, well, how about this? Huh? Oh, great. Okay. So let's talk.
Speak into this because of the video camera.
Okay, so point on this one. Okay, I got you. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk I want to talk today about generational worship. What has happened? What are the effects? Where are we going? What does it look like? And I think you're going to see some pretty staggering statistics about what things are doing. I've been studying this for a while. So I want to just introduce what these generations are. First, I didn't even add it because of time, because I would have been here for 2 hours just describing all of the generations. But there is one ahead of the silent generation. It's called the GI generation, or the greatest generation. That's the generation that would have fought most of the wars, the World War I, World War II, okay? And many of our parents possibly in here were in that generation for sure. But the silent generation, who would have been my parents, if you were born between 1928 and 1945, you were in the silent generation. Okay?
Silent.
Pardon?
We're not silent.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you in a minute why they labeled you that. But there was 47 million of you born in that silent generation. Okay? The really cool statistic is 84% of you claim to be Christian, claim to know the Lord. That's a pretty impressive number, right? When you think about it, because you can see as we talk what's going to happen. But that's the silent generation. So I didn't want to age everybody, but how many? Good supply. All right. And then we have the baby boomers. You all heard, and you've had to, a lot of our children are baby boomers. I'm a baby boomer. But they were labeled the baby boomers. From 1946 to 1964 we were born. And look at the shot. 69 million of us were in the baby boomer generation. But we've dropped to 76% calling ourselves Christian or God-based, right? By the way, I'll just back up 1 second. This chart was generated by the Pew Family Institute. The Pew family is active today. All they do is sit around and write statistics on anything and everything, but it's called the Pew family. They have about 200 employees, and all they sit around and they figure out how many people are in these generations, and they probably assist in naming them for all I know. The next generation is Generation X. Children born between 65 and 80, and we dropped in millions of population to 65 million in that timeline, and we went to 67% calling themselves Christian, God-based. Millennials. We all know about these new millennials, don't we? We hear a lot about that even on TV and all kinds of places, but the millennials are very popular. They're 81 to 96, and there was 73 million of them, which is the biggest generation to date in that timeline. And 49% of them call themselves. So we just dropped below half the population of being Christian, God-based, right? Look at that and that. Something. Now this latest generation that they've labeled, they haven't gone past 2012 yet, but the latest generation from 97 to 2012 is back to 67 million, still below the boomers, but 67 million in this Generation Z. This number's not known yet. Where do you think it's going? Unfortunately, we're probably going to see that number in the 30s for sure. We're losing at least 10% a year. That's not saying what they haven't labeled yet in the next generation, and where's that one going, right? So that's just a layout of just what the generations are that we're going to kind of discuss today. So let's just quickly go through these because I don't want to get too much time tied up in them, but the silent generation. What's the characteristics of a silent generation? Well, they got their name because they don't want to change the system, they want to work within it. Okay? Remember, you're GI babies, right? You've already come from this high-powered, military-based parents, and you got your name because you want to work, you want to be basically left alone, and you have a goal in mind. You're more interested in your retirement fund than your hourly wage. No sitting presidents ever came out of the silent generation. We went from George W. Bush all the way to Bill Clinton. You never got a president. Until possibly now. Because guess who's in the silent generation? Joe Biden. So almost 100 years later, right? 90 years later, the silent generation's going to get a president. Interesting. It didn't have that leadership, world leader, U.S. leadership, right? It missed it. You had babies younger than any other generation. That's an interesting fact because if you look at the populations, you can kind of put that together, right? I know I had some grandmothers who were married and having babies in their mid-teens. I'm sure you have some of you have the same stories, right? That was what came out of the silent generation. Here's an interesting one. You popularized the statement midlife crisis. So what'd you guys do in the 50s? You bought your Corvette and you bought your new wife. Right? That would be your midlife crisis. And you were the generation that dictated what a midlife crisis was. I thought that was pretty interesting. You kick-started the divorce generation. Divorced more, right? Started that. You can just kind of see how parenting changes through the generation, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you were one of the hardest working generations there ever was. Remember, you were born in the Great Depression, right? Right in the end of it or right in the middle of it. So you knew how to work. You knew what that work was like. I can tell you, my dad, I have a story about him, and before he was 10, he was in and out of 3 orphanages because his mom couldn't afford to keep him, didn't have a dad around. 3 orphanages. Before he was 12, he worked in the cotton fields in Arkansas, where he picked 2 sacks of cotton a day for $1. Wow. I don't do anything for $1 anymore. I don't even know what $1 looks like. It's all changed. But that was the attitude my dad had. I remember as a teenager, and my dad was born in '33. He's passed now. I remember as a teenager going to a seminar, Get Rich Quick seminar. And the seminar was to take all the equity out of your home and buy another home. And then when you built a little equity in that, you take that out and you just keep doing it. So I went to my dad. I said, Dad, I got this great plan for us. I want you to take all the equity out of your home, and we're going to go do all this stuff. And he looked at me like I was a complete idiot. He's as a silencer, can you imagine in the 80s, you've worked all your life for $1 and your son shows up to tell you to take the equity out of your home? Yeah, that didn't go over very well. So that was some cool stuff. That's interesting stuff about silent people. I personally am a boomer. Boomers were basically named after the World War II increase in the birth rate. Okay, so we understand that. We had 4 sitting presidents. We had Bill Clinton, we had George Bush Jr., we had Barack Obama, and we had Donald Trump. We got 4 leaderships out of this generation. 80% of our country's net worth today is built into the boomers. There's about 20% left in the silence of U.S. net worth. But 80% of the country is basically owned and managed, and the wealth is in the boomers today. We popularized, the boomers, the phrase bucket list, right? I'm going to kick the bucket, so before I kick the bucket, I'm going to put all this cool stuff in it, and I'm going to go do it, right? That was a boomer. That's what we want to do. We want to go climb Mount Everest, and we want to do anything that happens to come in our mind, right? We want to put on our bucket list. So the boomers did that. But we did learn our hard work from our parents. That passed along, and boomers work still very, very hard. And remember, because of it, we have funded the silence retirement through Medicare and Medi-Cal and all that, but we're going to run out possibly, right, because of our population. So we have to deal with that. But we did learn our hard work ethics from the silent generation. Pretty interesting facts, so let's go to the next one. Generation X. If you're born in 65 to 80, you're called a Generation X. Your nickname was the latchkey generation. This is really where family and parenting, I think, really started decaying. What does latchkey mean? It means the kids were left at home, they were locked out the door, and both parents or a parent worked all the time. Kids had a lot more solitude, right? They had to deal with their own stuff. They had to entertain themselves. They had to educate themselves, right? What happened? Well, we educated them all right, and TV did it. MTV started. I know we have a lot of MTV fans in here. None. MTV took off. These kids are watching 165 hours of TV a month. That's probably more now. I thought that was a little low. Personal computers have launched. This was the so their lives are on their the Walkman. Remember the Walkman? That started in this generation. What did it do? You lost communication with your kids. They don't have it anymore, right? So these kids really got stuck between two generations. Two big generations, right? That's what happened to them. And I have a brother-in-law, I have nephews, and they all absolutely 100% fit this generation. It's absolutely amazing. You can't get them off of a video game today. They're even in their almost in their 50s. And you can't get this person off the video games. They absolutely are consumed by them. The personal computer starts in this generation. Let's go on. Now let's talk about these famous millennials. My children are millennials, 81 and 85. They were born. Largest generation at 72 million. Their lives are basically all consumed on their phones. From the minute they wake up till the minute they go to bed, they're on their phones, right? Everything's set up there. Think about what they've already gone through as children. They've already gone through 2008 recession, right? They had to see that firsthand as little guys. They had a technological explosion in their social media. Social media is what makes them happy. It's what makes them famous. Their whole life is taught. Their personalities all come from social media. They had to deal with 9/11 as youngsters. My daughter was graduating high school when 9/11 hit, so you can imagine watching that on TV as a little person or a teenager. But they're more likely to graduate college. They're more interested in graduating college than the boomers were, right? I was more interested in having a tech or a trade, right? My parents buried in me to, hey, get a trade, you'll never go hungry, right? Work with your hands, service industry. Not this generation. They work with their hands, but it's typically it's on a keyboard, right? So you see this generation completely changing from the ethics and the work ethics and the society opposed to what the silents and the boomers did, right? Families now become a little less important. Their average age to marry now is 30. 100%, a flip-flop from the silence, right? Everything's changed. So now the babies are getting born later. And these millennials are wanting to experience more life. They're wanting to experience more things. They're making more money, right? Most of them, they graduated college, so their incomes are higher, much higher than a silent. Good night, a silent probably was lucky to make $10,000 to $15,000 a year when we were their age, right? I just found these numbers to be staggering. Generation Z. This would be, my grandson actually just made this generation. He's 8 years old. The rest of my grandchildren will be named later. Only a few things are known about this generation so far, and what we do know is by age 10 they have their cell phones. By age 10, they're going to start studying whatever they learn on social media and on their cell phones. And they're already spending at least 3 hours a day on their phone. At least. It's probably more like 6. I would say that number's low. Staggering, huh? It woke me up when I started studying. I was, I gotta do a message on this because this is just fascinating to me.
Since the pandemic, you're on our computers, we learn how to make all.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to get there too in just a second. So going back to our chart, again, we haven't even named this generation, but the church, Christian worship, has deteriorated to a point that, where do we think it ends? Is there only 8 left? Happened once, right? Happened once. Who's winning this battle? It's not the Christians, right? So what do we got to do? Where's this going to go? What changes have already been made in the church? Well, let's just touch on that for a minute. What changes do we see in our church today, and how has it changed over the generations? That's what I wanted to speak about a little bit. How about in our appearance? How did we go to church as silence? Coat and tie. Did you ever see any shorts? You were kicked out, weren't you? You were told to go home and change. I remember the fact that we'd go to, when I was a little guy, and my parents didn't go to church, believe it or not. They wanted me to go. They dropped me at the curb. But it was specific that I had my Sunday clothes. Nothing else worked. You didn't touch them all week, but your Sunday clothes, right? So, and I remember Easter's. Oh my goodness, Easter Sunday, right? My girls, I know my wife, I've seen pictures, and the white gloves, the puffy dress, the black shoes, the hats, right? So special that today, through the generations, what's happened? It's okay if we show up in shorts. It's okay if we wear cut-off jeans. It's okay if we have flip-flops. We've accepted that. The church has accepted that. Honestly, I can accept that. If the heart is right and that person's here for the Lord, I don't care if he's drug out here off the side of the curb. He needs to be here. But there was Lee dresses like this out of respect, right? You're honoring the Lord with how we appear. And I just want to make sure that we continue to show the generations below that it's still important to us, right? They need to respect the Lord, not us. But I think that there's times when that dress is important, and it's an honor, it's a respect, and that's how the Lord wants to be worshipped. Wants to be worshipped that way. He made it clear in the Bible he wanted to be worshipped that way, right? Here's a good one. How's music changed? Oh, I knew that'd be a laugh. Well, I can tell you this. I've grown up in some churches that had wonderful choirs. I think it is a travesty that choirs are not as important today as they used to be. It's something that I want my grandchildren to experience, the innermost peace of being able to feel the hair on the back of your neck raise when you hear 100-person choir. And I've had the privilege, even here, we've had some amazing, amazing choirs. And there's just nothing like it. And when you think about it, and we do some studies, and I know Jim will back me up here, back there, how many times are choirs mentioned multitudes of singing? It goes on and on and on in the Bible, right? David, look at Revelation. We're going to sing. We're going to sing together, right? The bad voices will become new. God, I hope that's true. Because I can't sing, right? I hope that this voice can sing someday because I want to do that. I want to be able to sit in a choir and listen to the voices. When the pandemic hit recently, there was a composer that did a virtual choir. And he had people send in their voices, and he dubbed them all on a musical video. And the sound and the pureness of the pitch almost brought tears to your eyes. And I envisioned that to be like it's going to be in heaven. That we're going to sit there and we're going to hear a sound we've never heard before. And I want my grandchildren to hear that. Don't get me wrong. I love Lincoln Brewster. I love the guy. I think he's got a ministry that wins people to Christ. Him and a lot of other of this Christian rock, they're wonderful, cherishable men of God. I believe that, and that's great to have. But my ears rang for 3 days. Okay, it wasn't as pleasing to my ear as it was to hear his testimony and where this man was. But I'm not in generation millennial. I'm not in those generations, and that could have been a lot more appealing to me to hear him. And I don't disregard that in any way. Those men are special, and they need to be in our society. I truly believe that. But when some of these hymnals come out, and I can put myself into that hymn, I come to the alone while the dew is still on the roses. I literally, that's my favorite song. And I literally almost can't get through the song without getting emotional. I feel the Lord in my presence when that song is being sung. Rick back there, Thompson, told me just a while ago that every morning part of his devotional is reading hymnals. Same with Yvonne. It's so important to us. We have to move that on to our generations. It is so important that they get that emotional about their music. It really is. No. That's where I'm at there. So let's move on to preaching. Preaching to the choir. I didn't think I'd have a lot of pushback on that one. But let's talk about how the preaching has changed. I've been really, really fortunate in my life. I've had a Dr. Bohr teach me. He's down in Southern California. I have been in a church with Dr. David Hawking, David Seifert, Rick Countryman, Rick Thompson, Gordon Rumble, Joel Boone. We have been blessed with the teaching we've had in our lives. I am 100% on board with the teaching I've been able to get in my life. It has changed. When I went to Israel with Rick and I had Scott, I got the teaching, I got the music, and I got the vision and the view of something you just can't pray enough to get that kind of stuff. It's just amazing to get that. But when you get the preaching like we've had, it's special. But my worry is the preaching that my children, my friends' children are getting is off the internet. It's off their phones. It's not church. It's not the kind of preaching that is going to enrich their lives like I think our lives have been blessed. I'm worried about that. I'm worried that, and don't get me wrong, I learn a lot off my laptop. I get a lot of information off that laptop. But I get spiritually fed here. I need to be with my people. I need to have my fellowship. And when you try to do that in another way, it's just not the same. And I stress the fact that we keep our kids and our grandkids in church, in the worship center where they need to be. Well, what's our worst change? Well, the absolute worst thing that could have happened to us is this COVID-19. What it's done to worship is it's enabled alternatives for the generations. It's enabled them to feel like they can get their church service on their internet and get right into their lives for the day and forget completely about worship. Worshiping is important. And if the pandemic is going to have a bigger effect on worship and on churches than anything else in society, in my opinion. It's not going to change. It's not going away anytime soon, probably not even in my lifetime. We're going to be dealing with COVID. I won't be surprised if that unnamed generation is called the COVID generation. I won't be surprised. I think that's the impact that this is going to have on our U.S., on the world. So let's talk now about, yes ma'am.
So why don't the churches buck the government and open up?
Well, one of my biggest resources that I teach from is David Jeremiah and John MacArthur. I didn't want to get into a huge debate, but I am 100% behind a lot of things that John MacArthur did. He stood up. He's different, and he stood against the grain, and I respect him tremendously. I get a lot of my text and a lot of my work from him. So I think as the elderly generation that we are, it's going to be up to us to change. It's going to be up to us to make the changes, and they're starting in our own families. And from our families, it'll go to the cousins, and from the cousins, it'll go to the nephews and the relatives and the friends, and it's going to have to start. We'll get into that. I got a little more on that too. So let's talk a minute about just the rawness of worship, because I think that's really what I wanted to zero in on. Why has worship changed? Why has it deteriorated so badly? And where is it going to go? If it stays as is, in 20 years, there's one table of people in here. Could be, right? Unless the Lord comes back pretty fast, we're not going to be here that forever. And the generations are going in a direction, like I said before, there was only 8 people on the ark. Where's that going to go? Where's that number going to go? It certainly points toward the tribulation, doesn't it? It certainly points that sin will continue to take over this earth. So, where is this generation thing going? Worship is mentioned in the Bible about 8,250 times. Think that's important to the Lord? It's so important to him that he spent 3 chapters and 200 and almost 50 verses telling them how to build his temple. You think that was important to the Lord? I think this place is extremely important to the Lord. So where does this? How do we turn the pages on this? Worship is giving homage, honor, reverence, respect, adoration, praise, glory to the Lord. That's a basic definition of it. Well, I searched and I read, and I even passed through John MacArthur and David Jeremiah and find out some things about worship. And a lot of pastors narrow it down to a very simple verse on worship. And what is that verse? 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at the table. Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard, and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. Of all the passages in the Bible, like I said, many pastors go to this passage to represent true worship. So interesting that they pick this one. But Mary does three things here that is super special about how they've laid this out. Mary worships the Lord at this moment three ways: with her body, representing her body in front of Jesus; her heart, she had a heart for him; and she worships him with her wealth, right? Something I think dramatically missing in these generations. They have a different perspective of what worship is. And Mary, in this text, shows it absolutely perfectly. She's in such a zone. You know what a zone is? Rick knows what a zone is. A zone, is kind of a sports name when you're in a zone, right? You're in kind of an out-of-body experience. And you can almost do an art without even thinking about it. It's just a moment when you just have a natural connection to what you're doing. When you play golf and they call it, oh, he must be in a zone, it's because everything is perfect. And everything you touch just happens so easily and naturally. But everything is zoned out around you. And I think Mary, in this instance, was completely zoned out. She was locked into the Lord. How often do we get locked into the Lord like she was? She presented herself, she knelt, what a feeling to be able to actually touch the Lord and be part of that moment. Her heart was so pure at that moment. There was a lot going on around her. If you read on, Judas was bad-mouthing her because she was putting the expensive wine or nard on Jesus. Hey, we can sell that for enough money to give to the poor and probably satisfy the needs of many people with that amount of money that nard was being put on Jesus. What did Jesus say? You leave her alone. He was enjoying, he was being worshipped as he wanted to be worshipped. He was enjoying that moment. And at the end, she wasn't. Do you think she was worried about the cost of that nard? No. She knew who she was in front of. She knew what he was probably getting ready to go through. She knew what he had been through. She knew who she was touching. And she wanted to do nothing more at that moment but worship him. John MacArthur says that worship is not what we get, but it's what we give. If you go to church to worship the Lord and you're expecting to get something back, you probably came with the wrong intention. If you would do that, you're probably going to be more apt to complain about that situation. Hey, I didn't like the music today. It didn't touch me. you know what? That pastor wasn't on key today. He didn't say the right words. You haven't come with the right heart. You haven't come to give the Lord your body, and you haven't come with any of your wealth. Does that make sense? Right. If you come to church with the thought of you always want to get something, the blessings will come from the worship. Right? The blessings will come. The Lord will bless us, and in the end, you will get. We do receive. Right? But the first thing is we want to give to Him. We want to be giving to Him as a holy sacrifice. Right? The greatest lesson from the church today is exclusive Christ-centered, Scripture-based worship must continue to be the heartbeat of the modern church. And John says that. You want to save the modern church? They got to do these things. They have to be Christ-centered. They have to be Scripture-based. If these youngsters are getting their lessons from the internet, and it's a feel-good type of lesson, and the bottom of the screen is nothing but how much money can you give me and where to send your funds, there's probably something wrong on that video screen. Their heart and their worship is not in the right place. That's what we're searching for here. We're searching here to teach those youngsters where that heart and that worship is supposed to be. Romans 12:1 says it pretty clear. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is true and proper worship. I want my kids to know true and proper worship. I want their friends to know true and proper. I'm super blessed that I learn more from my son. He's more knowledgeable in the Bible, I think, than I am half the time. And we have some wonderful talks. But true and proper worship is what needs to be passed through these later generations. Not saying that we don't need to improve, but we need to seriously worry about where the generations are moving towards. So how do we, as Rick says, land a plane? How do we reverse these percentages? How do we do that? With bold, we have to be bold. That is a very important word for Christians today. I pray every day that I would be bolder and that I wouldn't miss opportunities. And we are not bold enough. You want to see an example of bold? Go on a field trip with mustard seeds. You know what they'll do to you? They'll search the crowd and they'll bring me some unsaved person. Hey, Mark, this guy wants to know about Jesus. I just found him. And they'll put him right in front of you and put you right on the spot. And they'll do that time and time again. You better be ready. They've caught me off guard more than I can say. But why is a mustard seed so bold? Why are they bolder than me? Why did they find that person and I didn't? The life of a mustard seed. My son, who's a millennial, I mentioned a minute ago, did something a few years ago that I wanted to share. We have a business and a truck stop, and there's lots of trucks parked, hundreds of trucks parked around us all the time. And my son left the shop, and he was going to walk across the parking lot to go get something to drink or something to eat at the store. And as he's walking over there, it was cold. It was about like it is now. It was pretty chilly. And he's walking over there, and he passes a homeless guy sitting on a curb in front of the store begging for money. Had barely any clothes on, no shoes. And he walks up to him, and my son strikes a conversation with him and asked him where his shoes were. He didn't have any, da-da-da. So my son, this is interesting, being a millennial, never has cash. Ever. They have debit cards. They live on debit cards, okay? So that I promise you, everybody in here's got a money clip or have money in their purse. Not a millennial. If you're a millennial, you don't carry cash. So my son wanted to do something for this guy. He sits down on the curb next to him, takes his boots off and his socks, and he puts them on this guy. And he ties his shoes and he gets him all set. He ends up ministering to this young man, and he wins him to the Lord. And there has never been a prouder moment of a father than when your children win people to the Lord. And when my son walked back across that cold driveway with his feet freezing by then, I said, "Son, you left with shoes. Where'd they go?" So I got a story from him, and that's bold. That's being bold. That's what I want to hear from all the millennials, from all the, and ours included. We got to be bold. We got to step out and take a chance on getting ridiculed and getting beat up, because you know what? When I'm standing in front of the Lord someday, He's going to look at me and He's going to say, I either passed an opportunity or I took advantage of an opportunity. But I think He's going to look at me and say, you were bold, or you weren't. You stepped out for me. You didn't worry about people. And these generations need to be that way. We need to be bold for the Lord. And finally, I think to close today is there's nothing we can do but pray. There's a lot of power in prayer. There is life changing in our families in prayer. And when I have the opportunity to pray with my family now, I try to huddle all my grandkids around, and I want them to see me pray. We still do what our parents did a lot of. My dad was, even though he wasn't saved, was very influential in my life. My mother and father-in-law, who have been my religious people I've watched my whole life, my mentors are my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and prayer is extremely important for our families, and the generations see us pray together. When I have a grandchild that has a birthday, I put him in my arms and I pray for that grandchild specifically. We have to do prayer together. That will change these generations. It will save our personal generations, but it'll spread and it'll do things. I just can't say enough about it. I hope this challenges us today just a little bit to take this home, take these charts home, have a conversation with them. Because I think it's stuff that's really, really important to the growth of not only our church, but our families. Pray with me. Father, I'm just blessed to just have a chance to even speak like this. And I'm just grateful that you just calmed my heart and went right through me and continue to just speak your truth. And God, I'm not worthy of any of this, but I'm just so grateful you are. I just thank you, God, that we have the knowledge that we have, and we have opportunity in our lives to spread our knowledge of you, and it's important that these younger generations are also willing to accept it. And just God, just bless us. Just take this time and love us, and help this pandemic to not change the world, that we can change it with you and with prayer. God, we just love you so much, and I just thank you again for opportunities we have in our lives. We ask that you guide and bless us all this day. In Jesus' name, amen.